Hi friends, welcome back. So I want to have a chat with you about why some people get rich and why some people stay poor. And I want to use an example here. We have a comment coming from the community. This is from Dan, just 12 hours ago. Dan writes, my family and I should be perfect Harris voter. We have children with special needs. We rely on government provided healthcare. We're a low income family and we depend on the government for many of our needs. And yet we voted for Trump. Why? When you have boys playing in girls' sports, when you don't have freedom over who can see your body or what goes into your body, you have to decide what's more important. No, I don't like the possibility that the government might cut food stamps or educational support. Of course not. But those are things that can be restored in the future. However, once you open the door to allowing boys to identify as girls and vice versa, that's something you can't put back into the box. So yes, I'll be taking a big economic hit and things will get harder. But having bodily autonomy and personal choice is even more important to me. And I'm bringing up this Dan because when I read this comment, it's like, sadly, I think there's a large proportion of the population out there that thinks like Dan, and you could argue the majority, right? Trump won the election, and this sort of reminds me why I need to keep putting out this kind of content and educational content to help you. And I'm seriously trying to help you to improve your life. Let's be honest, guys. It takes money to have a better life. I'm just being completely honest with you. It takes money to have food. It takes money to move to a better neighborhood. It takes money to put your kids in better schools. These kind of things. And when I see this kind of comment, I'm pretty frank, it just makes me feel sad. If you don't know my background, I grew up poor. I grew around people like Dan. I really know. I grew up around adults and they're all talking about how the gays and back then it wasn't trans, it was just all the gays and stuff are going to ruin the world and the people from south of the border are going to ruin the world. And that's all they do all day. It's just like poor people just sit around and complain about other poor people. and they don't actually, instead of using all that energy, instead of complaining, you would actually try to improve your life, improve yourself, get better job skills, educate yourself, etc. But I understand guys. I understand more. It is difficult to have that perspective when you've never seen anyone escape your community. And I do mean escape. I can't stress that enough. I talk about this in my book called Positive Angle. And sometimes people say, well, Chris, why are you so negative? How is this positive? Do you know how it's positive? Is because you can see a light at the end of the tunnel. You can see that there's a way out. For me, it was education. For me, it was hard work. For me, it was building up positive relationships. Talk about it in my book. And I know how it is. When I read this stuff, I just feel sad because what people don't understand, and talking about this Dan person here, is that you're not only dooming yourself to basically staying poor, being impoverished, you're dooming your children, right? And this is where you get this generations of that's not what I say, I'm trying to be nice about, but just generations of poor people that are uneducated. And they're so concerned about boys playing girl sports. It's like, does it happen? Yes, maybe 1 out of 100 million or whatever the number is, but it is not this like crazy epidemic and crazy army of trans people gonna go play in boys playing girl sports. And I get it. If you watch Fox News or you watch Elon Musk's Twitter, that's what you think. You get focused on just that issue and you forget about food for your kids, education for your kids, and frankly, it's sad. And I just have to point this out. Now, what's even worse, and I need to point this out also, and sometimes people don't, I don't know, they get in this weird mindset where they're just tunnel visioned. This is coming from Fox News. Now, I'm gonna use the example of Vivek, how many of these people in this side of the aisle, right, on this, we want to call it, say, Republican Party or whatever, it's basically scammers. Either Vivek, you want to talk about Elon or whatever, and why are they scammers? Because they pretend like they understand your problems. And they pretend, oh yeah, I'm just like you. And why does this matter? Because guys, if you grow up poor and you make it out, right? And it's different, right? If you're in the rural area, you make it from the rural, you go find a better job because and this is how it is. In some cities in the USA, there's just not jobs there. There's no young people, there's no jobs. You have to leave if you want a better life, right? Or you could be, in a situation to where you're in a poor neighborhood in a big city, which is also a thing. And that's also very real. Like in that situation, maybe there's a lot of violence around you. Maybe you can't sleep at night. And guys, you don't know, I used to live in New York City in a very poor section. I can tell you there's like loud music every night and it makes it impossible to study. Or there's drug dealers on street corners. I've seen it. It is ridiculous. I used to live in Philadelphia. I used to have bars in my window when I lived in Philly. It was unsafe after 10 o'clock. basically when it gets dark. But the reason why I mention this stuff is because like these people, and I know, guys, it's hard to get out of those kind of neighborhoods and situations because you don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And so then when Ramaswamy, and just read the headlines, this is from Fox News. He says here, this is Vivek. Ramaswamy's claims he came from, quote, no money clash with prep school upbringing. This is coming from Fox News just last year. And essentially they dug into it, and Vivek had a dividend stock portfolio coming out of high school. He was a millionaire when he was in college, and even took a scholarship, which is kind of ridiculous, a scholarship for law school, because I guess he was making like $2 million a year. That's according to his taxes. And the reason why it's ridiculous is because scholarships for college are meant for poor kids of, children of Dan, right? Do you understand why I really dislike these people like Vivek? Like this dude's, making a couple million a year. And let's say Dan's kid, just for example, let's say Dan, and I don't mean to always hate on people who don't have education. Like, there's nothing wrong with having a good job in terms of like you're a carpenter, you're a skilled trade, you're a longshoreman, you're a car repair, you're a solar panel, installer, you work for the phone company, whatever. There's any number of jobs. I don't ever mean to diminish someone's hard work. And in fact, I'm trying to help you, right? Because this is also the reality. And the question I pose to you, do you want your children to have a better life than you? It's a simple question. Do you want your children to have a better life than you, or do you want your children to have the same life as you? And for me, when I think about Dan, and he's like, oh, I don't care about healthcare and stuff like that. I'm just gonna vote for Trump, even if my life's gonna be harder, because I'm so worried about boys playing in girls' sports. And it's like you're dooming your kids to this kind of world. But going back to this, and I know it's hard to talk about this stuff. It's sensitive topics, but I get so frustrated with it. Is that let's say one of Dan's kids ended up being really smart, okay? And one of Dan's kids is accepted to a pretty good school, but they can't afford it. And then you find out that someone like Vivek, who is making $2 million a year, takes your kid's, I don't know if takes the right word, but just is awarded a scholarship when he didn't need it. And it's just, it's frustrating. And so when you look at this stuff, and again, this is all coming from Fox News. Fox News is in on the sham, right? So now in 2024, Vivek's all over them with Elon Musk, because they're serving the Republican agenda of cutting all these programs and things like that and services to help poor people, right? Not be poor. And that's what it is, right? So now and this is Vivek as a headline here. We have a once in generation mandate right now. Oh yeah. And they put him on TV all the time. And look at this headline. Kamala Harris makeover isn't working, says Vivek. And they have another headline. Kamala is out of touch with the middle class, right? And it's funny, and I'm sure Vivek's going to go around and say that he grew up poor or whatever like that. And it's like Fox News' own, investigation on him proved it wasn't true. Dude went to private school. He actually played tennis at a very high level. I guess he was nationally ranked, so that kind of stuff would require private lessons. And how do I know this stuff, guys? Because I grew up poor. I know how it is. And it's like, how do you explain to people? And when you want to reach to the highest levels of society, because oftentimes people say, oh, Chris, you're so dumb. Why aren't you a billionaire like Musk? Because it is really, really hard to reach that kind of level if you don't have parents backing you at a young age. If you don't have parents that can just buy you plane tickets to anywhere around the world, if you don't have parents that can like invest in your company, like give you, $1 million when you're young, most families don't have that. Or in Vivek's situation, like he has a dividend stock portfolio, and then he becomes a millionaire young, and then I guess he was involved in some sort of scam or whatever. I was reading about his company. He was claiming it would do really good and be part of Berkshire Hathaway, and then I was reading like the drug didn't work, so who knows what he was doing up with that. I mean, and then there's this thing about him too, that he was like paying Wikipedia to write a nice, article about him. So, it's this kind of stuff is like, isn't it obvious these people are scammers? Isn't it obvious? But the sad thing, no, it's not obvious to a lot of people. That's how these people like Dan get fooled. And essentially what I'm trying to say is people stay poor because they hold themselves back. They hold on to these crazy beliefs about the world, about things that yes, they exist. I'm not saying that, boys playing girls sports doesn't exist. But to what extent? Is it like everyone in the world is doing this? No, it's not. It's a very, very small percentage of these people. And in fact, this is also real, guys. When I was a kid, I remember I grew up in Oregon, rural Oregon. I was frankly around a bunch of idiots. I know how it is. I really know. I had friends who like would run around with machetes, and for them it was fun to go chase possums with machetes. For real, that's it was like entertainment for some people. I had friends that just hang out at 7-Eleven all day and they just drink, and that's fun to hang out at 7-Eleven and drink. Guys, I really know the cool kids that back then in my high school, because they're frankly idiots. It was like getting woofers in your car and like, oh yeah, it's so cool to have like these big car stereo. That was a thing back in the 80s. And I'm kind of mean about this stuff now, but the thing is, I see where they ended up, right? I see where they ended up. You know where they ended up? Exactly where they started. Most people never leave their hometown. And why do I kind of be mean about this thing? Because you have to talk real to people about this stuff. You really do. And because most of the world is fake, and that's why I point this stuff out. So Vivek stuff is fake, the Musk stuff is fake, right? And then I'll see it in comments. They'll say, "Oh, Chris, you're so dumb. Vivek went to public school. You just don't know what you're talking about." And I'm like, "Okay, this is the article right here. Please look it up." It's true. He went to public school when he was elementary, I guess. His parents decided, you know what, we're gonna put you in private school for high school, and that's what they did. I think they said tuition was 15,000 a year, which is not cheap today. Now it's relatively inexpensive today, but this would have been, I don't know how Vivek is. We'll say he's 40. I don't know exactly, but say 25 years ago, that would have been pretty high actually. And most families can't even afford it now in USA, let alone again have dividend stock portfolio, let alone, I guess people were writing in comments that he came from a wealthy neighborhood. His parents came from a wealthy neighborhood and wealthy caste in India. They're not poor. It's just, it's ludicrous. And so, I challenge you. And this is also this a real thing. Not that many people come from poor background and raise themselves up. There's not that many. Is it impossible? No, it is not impossible. Is it hard? Absolutely. It's harder, in fact, because you don't have the backing, and also too, you don't have the support around you of like other friends seeing it, right? You don't have that many friends that get an education to see what it's like to move up in society. You just don't see it that often. I hate to tell you the truth about this, but it is. You get to the higher level of society, like you go work at Goldman Sachs or whatever, you'll figure out like, oh, it's not really about how talented I am or stuff like that. It's about whose daddy has what job and whose mommy is, has what connections or whatever. And is the whole world like that? Not necessarily, right? This is one positive thing about the USA. Yes, you can improve yourself. You totally can. Get yourself an education, get yourself a good job. You know what else you can do? You can invest and save. It is not the same thing in other parts of the world. It's not. They don't necessarily have free markets or transparency. I'll give you an example, guys. I used to live in China, and yes, they have a stock market there. They totally do. But if a company decides to scam you, there's like no penalties for said company, right? Because you can just buy off whatever government officials. Does it happen in USA? Yes, it does actually. And in fact, we're seeing it right now with Elon Musk. That's why I try to point this stuff out to you. Like the world is not a fair place, but you have to also understand too that a lot of these people at the top on this particular side of the aisle just deceive you every day and get you focused on the wrong things. So I know this is a bit of a rant. We've been kind of having a lot of these kind of things lately, but I get frustrated because the people who voted for this particular felon that's now president, they're just misleading themselves and holding not only themselves back, and sadly holding many other people's children back, and they're led by a lot of these essentially scammers. There's no other way to put it. So I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on this stuff, and if you know this stuff about Vivek, please let me know. And if you know someone like a Dan, please let me know. And what can we do to help these kind of people? Or someone else has said, just give up, don't worry about it, they're hopeless. But I don't believe that. Why do I say that? Is because Dan has kids, and maybe you can't save Dan, but I don't necessarily want to doom his kids to that kind of life also. I myself never wanted it for me. And then that's something I've struggled with all my life. I know how it is to have these kind of backgrounds, and how hard it is to escape it. And it is an escape. I mean, it's a prison in your mind, really. Anyway, we'll talk later about this, and I appreciate you watching.